The motorcycle community isn't dying, it's splintering. Quiet streets, empty rallies, and rising divides are reshaping the ride. If you think it's just about fewer bikes, you're missing the bigger story. Stick with me, because by the last minute you'll see exactly why this matters to you, even if you've never missed a ride. The quiet road. There was a time when the low hum of a V-twin on a Sunday morning felt like the heartbeat of the open road. You could step outside and hear the distant roll of a pack heading for the hills. Lately, that soundtrack is fading. Gas station parking lots that once overflowed with bikes now sit half empty. The coffee spots where riders swapped stories before a run feel oddly still. Even the familiar vibration of passing engines seems to come less often, as if the road itself has grown tired. On main streets, you notice the difference in small ways. A local diner that used to have half a dozen bikes lined up out front on Saturday mornings now gets one or two, if any. Scenic routes that once hosted an endless parade of two wheels are marked more by the absence of sound than by its presence. It is not that the love for riding has vanished, it is that the collective presence, the visible pulse of the community has dimmed. That absence is more than just numbers, it is a feeling that something vital is slipping away. What feels like silence on the streets is only the surface. Beneath it, riders are dividing into camps that barely speak the same language anymore. Tribes and turf wars. Walk into a small-town rally these days and you can sense the invisible borders. Over here, the cruisers park in neat lines, leather vests and patches marking long-standing loyalties. Over there, sport bike riders cluster in their own corner, bright fairings and race decals catching the light. Somewhere else, the vintage crowd tends their machines like museum pieces, speaking a different language of restoration and heritage. The simple bond of two wheels good is giving way to subcultures that eye each other with polite distance, if not outright suspicion. The split is not always loud or hostile. Sometimes it is a quiet absence. A sport bike group and a cruiser club might ride through the same small town within hours of each other, never crossing paths, never sharing a wave. The roads overlap, but the worlds feel entirely separate. The camaraderie that once drew all riders into the same circle now splinters into smaller, guarded groups. Riders swap stories only within their own style camps, avoiding conversations that might cross the cultural aisle. Gender divides can be just as stark. Women-led groups, often born from a need for safer and more inclusive spaces, sometimes find themselves set apart, their events running parallel to, rather than integrated with, the wider scene. It is not that diversity is unwelcome, many celebrate it, but when variety becomes division, the shared passion starts to fracture. Those rivalries don't stop at the parking lot. They're being magnified online, where algorithms quietly redraw the map of who talks to who. If you're feeling this shift on the road too, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Your stories might be exactly what another rider needs to hear. The social media divide. For all its power to connect, social media has been a double-edged sword for the motorcycle world. Riders used to find each other in person, at meets, on the road, through mutual friends. Now, more first impressions are formed through profiles and posts than through handshakes and shared rides. Algorithms feed riders only what matches their past clicks, building echo chambers where sport bike stunt videos never cross paths with vintage rebuild tutorials, and cruiser road trip vlogs rarely mingle with adventure bike trail clips. What used to be one broad conversation about riding is now 100 smaller ones, each tuned to its own style, pace, and priorities. The algorithms reward this fragmentation, making it easy to forget the larger community even exists. You are shown what you already like, and little else. These curated feeds create micro-communities so insulated that riders can go months without seeing a perspective outside their preferred style. It is easy to start thinking that your niche is the norm and everything else is an outlier. That breeds misunderstanding and sometimes outright dismissal of other corners of the riding world. When the digital map looks like a set of separate islands, it is no wonder riders arrive at real-world events already divided. The danger here is not just missed connections, it is the erosion of a shared language and identity. Without cross-pollination, the idea of us narrows until it barely stretches beyond the boundaries of a phone screen. While the digital walls grow taller, the real-world gatherings tell a harsher truth. Fewer faces, smaller crowds, and a lot more empty space. The road belongs to all of us. I've linked the gloves, jackets, and gear I ride with. No overpriced branding, just quality protection that keeps you riding your way. Reality check on the ground. Even for those who still show up, the spaces that once felt alive now carry a strange hollowness. Bike nights that used to spill over with the sound of engines and laughter now end early with more empty tables than full ones. Charity rides that once had hundreds of participants now see a fraction of that number, with organizers quietly wondering if it is worth the effort next year. Local rallies, once the highlight of a riding season, sometimes feel more like an obligation than a celebration. It is not just the head count, it is the energy. You can feel the difference between a crowd gathering because they want to and one gathering because they feel they should. The spontaneous conversations that sparked friendships have been replaced with quick greetings before people drift back to their own circles or head home early. Even major events are not immune. Big-name rallies still draw crowds, but many attendees now treat them as a once-a-year spectacle rather than a heartbeat of the culture. Organizers who once relied on word of mouth now struggle to fill a parking lot even after weeks of promotion. The turnout might look fine in photos, but those who remember the older days see the difference immediately. The noise, the density, the unpredictable magic, it is all fading. This is where the cracks become impossible to ignore. The quiet streets, the subcultural divides, the digital bubbles, all of them feed into this tangible thinning of the scene. And as the calendar turns and each event draws fewer faces, one question hangs heavier in the air. If this is what the present looks like, what does the future hold? Gray helmets, no recruits. Walk through any bike rally today and the first thing you notice is the silver. Rows of well-worn helmets, leather jackets with decades of stories etched into their creases, and faces weathered by wind and sun. These riders carry the heart of the community, but they also carry the truth. The average motorcyclist in the United States is now well past 50 years old. That number has been inching upward for decades, and the shift is not slowing. The problem is not just that riders are getting older, it is that there are not enough younger ones stepping in behind them. At meetups, you can almost read the decades on the faces in the crowd. The stories told around picnic tables stretch back to rides taken long before many potential new riders were even born. Without younger voices joining in, those conversations risk becoming archives rather than living traditions. The absence is visible at every level. Riding clubs that once had a waiting list for membership now struggle to fill spots. Annual group photos show the same familiar faces, a little grayer each year. There is no shortage of passion among the veterans, but passion alone cannot refill the ranks when people hang up their helmets for good. Without a pipeline of new riders, the community's future becomes a countdown clock. An aging community could still survive if younger riders could afford to join. But that's where the numbers start turning into roadblocks. Price tags that bite. The romantic image of a first bike bought on a whim for a couple of $1,000s is just that, romantic. Today, even the most basic entry-level motorcycle can cost $8,000, $10,000, or $12,000 before taxes, insurance, or gear. The numbers climb quickly, and for someone just starting out, the total can be daunting. Add a helmet, a jacket, gloves, and boots, and you are easily another $1,000 in. For younger riders just finding their financial footing, those figures can turn a dream into a delay or a decision to walk away entirely. Even the pre-owned market offers little relief. Once affordable starter models now fetch prices that would have seemed absurd a decade ago, driven up by scarcity and demand from collectors. For someone considering their first bike, the financial leap can feel less like a purchase and more like a gamble. It is not only the upfront hit. Insurance rates for riders under 25 are notoriously steep, sometimes rivaling the cost of the bike itself. Maintenance and repairs, especially for modern machines with more electronics, add another layer of expense. What used to be a hobby you could enter with minimal savings now requires a serious financial commitment before you even twist the throttle. Faced with these costs, many potential riders make a simple calculation. There are other ways to spend their time and money. Even if money wasn't an obstacle, there's another curve in the road. Fewer young people even dream about riding anymore. Different dreams. For many in their 20s or 30s today, adventure no longer comes on two wheels. It might come through a passport and budget travel, a cutting-edge gaming setup, or a camera capturing moments for an online audience. Where earlier generations sought open roads, newer ones often seek open Wi-Fi connections. It is not that they lack a sense of exploration, it is that their definition of it has changed. It is not that adventure has lost its appeal, it has simply been redefined. A long road trip might be replaced by a flight to a distant festival or an online collaboration across continents. The thrill is still there, but the vehicle delivering it is rarely powered by two wheels. Cultural shifts have reframed what is considered cool or aspirational. The slow, meditative rhythm of a long ride does not fit neatly into a world of instant content and rapid gratification. Urban living also plays a role. For many young adults in cities, owning and storing a motorcycle is impractical compared to using public transit or rideshare services. And when their social circles do not include riders, motorcycles become something to admire from afar rather than pursue firsthand. This shift in preference is not necessarily hostile to motorcycling. It is simply indifferent. The road still calls to some, but for those without exposure or encouragement, the call is faint. When the passion fades in the next generation, something even more vital disappears. The mentors who pass the craft down, one handshake at a time. The missing mentor. There was a time when new riders rarely started alone. A family member, a neighbor, or a friend would walk them through the first lessons, from balancing at a stop to taking the first cautious curves. These mentors did more than teach mechanics. They passed along the culture, the etiquette, and the unspoken codes that made the riding world feel like a second home. Today, those connections are fading. Without that first guided oil change or carburetor adjustment, many would-be riders never develop the confidence to tinker with their own machines. Manuals and videos can teach the steps, but they cannot replace the reassurance of a seasoned rider leaning over your shoulder saying, "Yeah, that's how it's done." As veteran riders age out or scale back, there are fewer opportunities for hands-on guidance. Many newcomers are left to learn through formal classes or online tutorials. While training courses can teach safety and skill, they cannot replicate the bond of learning under the wing of someone who has lived the lifestyle for decades. Without that bond, newcomers may feel less anchored in the community, more like customers than members. The lack of mentorship is not just about skills, it is about continuity. Without the transfer of experience from one generation to the next, traditions weaken and enthusiasm fades faster. And as these personal links disappear, the cracks in the community become harder to repair. Dealership ghost towns. Not long ago, a motorcycle dealership was more than just a showroom. It was a gathering place, a spot where you could grab a coffee, swap road stories, browse the latest gear, and maybe test ride something you had been dreaming about. Now, in many towns, those spaces are dark. The big glass windows are empty, the service bays are silent, and the neon signs are gone for good. Independent garages and small supply shops have followed the same path, leaving riders with fewer places to connect in person. In some towns, the vacant shells of former dealerships still sit by the roadside, their weathered signs fading under the sun. Passing them feels like riding past an abandoned outpost, once a vital stop for riders, now silent. The empty lots seem to echo with memories only the locals remember. The loss is more than logistical. These businesses anchored local motorcycle communities. They hosted weekend rides, charity events, and meetups that built friendships as much as they sold parts. Without them, the scene feels scattered. Riders who once saw each other weekly now cross paths only at major events, if at all. The small, everyday connections that kept the community alive are fading. When these hubs vanish, the culture suffers. It is one thing to lose a place to buy a bike. It is another to lose the sense of belonging those places fostered. Losing dealerships strips away meeting grounds, but what's worse is how some remaining spaces turn newcomers away before they even get started. The Gatekeeper Problem. Walk into a meet as a brand new rider and you should feel excitement. Too often what you feel instead is judgment. Maybe it is the sideways glance at your gear because it is not a well-known brand. Maybe it is the dismissive comment about your starter bike not being real. Gatekeeping in the motorcycle world has been around for decades, but in a shrinking community, its sting is sharper. Sometimes the judgment is subtle, a raised eyebrow at the wrong jacket brand, a smirk at a bike considered too small. Other times it is blunt and public. Either way, it chips away at a newcomer's enthusiasm, turning what should be a welcome into a quiet decision not to return. The irony is that many gatekeepers believe they are protecting the culture, upholding standards, honoring tradition. But what they are really doing is building walls that keep the community small. A new rider who is dismissed or mocked is less likely to return to that event, less likely to ride with others, and more likely to drift away entirely. Those losses add up over time. Respect for skill and history is important, but it should inspire rather than intimidate. Without openness, every fresh face we lose is one more seat left empty on the next group ride. Once the doors close to fresh riders, the old rituals don't just fade, they vanish without anyone left to carry them. Tradition slipping away. Some of the soul of motorcycling has always been tied to shared rituals. Annual rallies where riders camped under the stars, charity rides that brought hundreds together for a cause, initiation runs that welcomed newcomers into the fold. These were the heartbeat of the community. Now many of those traditions are weakening. Attendance at long-standing events has dropped. Some have been canceled altogether. Others survive only in name, stripped of the energy and spirit they once carried. The change is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle. A rally that once lasted an entire weekend now wraps up by Saturday evening. A group ride that used to bring in riders from 3 states over now struggles to fill a single rest stop. These events were never just about the ride. They were about the bonds forged along the way. Without them, the sense of shared identity erodes. Tradition is what turns a group of riders into a community. When it fades, the culture loses its anchor. Adaptive rebels. When the old pillars crumble, some riders refuse to let the culture fade. They rebuild it in their own way. Across the country, small groups have started hosting pop-up meets announced just hours in advance through text chains or private messages. These gatherings are stripped of the politics and posturing that sometimes plague larger events. Instead, they focus on the basics: ride in, hang out, swap stories, ride out. DIY garages have also begun to fill the gap left by closed dealerships. In converted warehouses or borrowed spaces, riders pool tools and expertise, teaching each other how to maintain and customize their machines. These shared workshops become more than repair spots. They are places where friendships form and knowledge spreads without judgment. In some cases, they even partner with local coffee shops or breweries to make the events feel more like community celebrations than maintenance chores. This grassroots energy does not replace the scale of the old scene, but it does prove something important. The spirit of the motorcycle world is not confined to official events or corporate support. Creative riders are finding new ways to survive, but looming laws and regulations threaten to undo their efforts in a single stroke. Politics in the saddle. Every rider knows that the freedom of the open road comes with rules, but in recent years those rules have tightened. Emission standards have forced manufacturers to alter or retire certain models, especially in regions with aggressive environmental policies. Noise ordinances have put limits on aftermarket exhaust systems, a change that has stirred strong feelings in communities where the sound of a bike is part of its identity. Safety regulations, while often well-intentioned, can also spark debate. Mandatory helmet laws, reflective clothing requirements, and stricter licensing procedures have their advocates, but they also add friction for potential new riders. In some states and countries, these layers of regulation have coincided with measurable drops in motorcycle registrations. Then there is the political theater surrounding motorcycles. In certain regions, riders have become a talking point in larger battles over transport policy, urban planning, or environmental reform. When lawmakers and interest groups view the motorcycle community primarily through the lens of regulation, the conversation shifts from celebration to control. Those rules don't just change the landscape, they change what you pay, what you ride, and even what you're allowed to keep on the road. Your wallet, your ride. When regulations change, the financial impact is rarely far behind. Stricter emissions laws can push manufacturers to invest in new technology, and those costs are passed down to buyers. Riders may find that the model they want now comes with a higher price tag, or that aftermarket parts have become more expensive due to compliance requirements. Insurance rates can also fluctuate in response to policy changes. For example, if a state introduces stricter licensing rules or classifies certain bikes as higher risk, premiums can climb overnight. Even gear choices can be affected. If reflective materials or advanced safety features become mandatory, the baseline cost of a riding jacket or helmet rises. For some, these changes are manageable. For others, they become another barrier to entry, joining the list of reasons to delay or abandon the idea of owning a bike. This financial strain does not just influence whether people ride. It shapes the kind of bikes they choose, the frequency of their rides, and the way they interact with the community. Every cost, every choice, every rule points to one of two futures. Neither of them guaranteed, both of them irreversible once chosen. If you want the truth about what's really happening in our motorcycle world, subscribe now, because the next ride we take together might just change how you see everything. Two roads ahead. If you follow the trends to their logical end, the motorcycle community faces two stark possibilities. In one, riding becomes a niche pursuit, smaller, more insular, and largely sustained by dedicated veterans and hobbyists. Events would shrink, dealerships would remain rare, and the culture would live on primarily in small, scattered groups. In this version of the future, the bond between riders might be intense, but it would lack the wide reach it once had. The other possibility is a resurgence driven by a mix of adaptive strategies and cultural shifts. New technology could make bikes cleaner, safer, and more affordable, drawing in a younger generation that values sustainability and individuality. Grassroots efforts could continue to grow, connecting fragmented groups into a new kind of network. Riding might never return to the exact form it had decades ago, but it could evolve into something equally vibrant, just different. Which path becomes reality depends on choices being made now, by riders, by manufacturers, and by policymakers. The road is open, but it will not stay that way forever. The next few years will decide whether motorcycles remain a living culture or become a cherished memory. If you like this video, hit the like button and let us know your thoughts in the comment below. Ride hard, stay sharp, and subscribe now, because the next story we uncover could be the one that changes how you see every mile ahead.